Let's give them a big welcome. Here they are. Haribo! So last night we heard a little bit of a history and then some personal experiences at that particular time. This evening we're going to start out with a video from Karandar Prabhu, who was really an amazing devotee in those particular days, a big leader in this society in Krishna consciousness. In fact, I remember that when I was first a new devotee, that every so often we would get like a tape, a ministry from Prabhupada's tape ministry. And what was really amazing that on some of the tapes, they allowed Karandar Prabhu for one of his classes, or a few of his classes that it was on that particular tape. And so when I was living in Denver, we would get this tape, and on the front side it was Srila Prabhupada, on the back side it was Karandar Prabhu. And we loved it. It was so amazing. To us as new devotees, he was an incredible devotee. He was so powerful in his preaching. At least for the new devotees, we really felt like that from the heart. So I did have back and forth communication with him. He's stuck in Brazil. He couldn't make it. We tried several different ways to get him here, but we couldn't. And he felt bad. We felt bad. But we were able to get like a 40-minute interview with him. Siddhanta Prabhu from ITV. He was able to have a 40-minute Zoom conversation. So we have that. We would like to start out this session hearing from him, and then maybe we can just slip right into our panel here. Okay?
Aren't you going to have that photo of Prabhupada and Shilavati? If he has it, I just wanted the devotees to see what Shilavati looked like.
I don't know. We'll have to talk to Archita.
What she looked like with Prabhupada.
Oh.
Well, let's get rolling. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Okay, Archita is here, is ready to go. Maybe you want to turn around and so you can see that screen, and we'll get ourselves going. Where is the other microphone? I can just move the other chair over here also. Moving. We are late.
Let's, maybe if it's okay with you, to discuss a little bit about you and you're kind of getting to that position of being the fortunate soul to perform the actual installation.
Okay.
So just a little background, a little color, so people can then realize, okay, this is that personality and this is what he is and how he got
Right.
there, etc.
Right.
So take me back a little bit. Were you and Keshava born and raised in San Francisco? Where were you raised, and maybe lead
No,
me
we
up
were
to?
born and raised in central coastal California, up the coast, San Luis Obispo and Santa Maria, that area.
Okay. Was it in that area that you came across devotees, or how did that transpire?
No, I came across devotees kind of by accident. I I got out of jail in Santa Barbara County. Santa Barbara, I had gotten busted for drugs. And I was part of the release term. I don't know how much detail you want. I mean, anyway, I wasn't allowed to be in Santa Barbara County anymore. So I went to stay until I could get set up. I went to stay with my dad, who lived down in Northridge in the LA area.
Oh, yeah, the Valley.
And I was going to the Vedanta Society place in North Hollywood. I had developed a strong, focused interest in yoga, spiritual life in jail. So in that sense, it was good for me.
Was that Paramahamsa Yogananda, that vein?
No, it was founded by Vivekananda,
Oh,
the
Vivekananda.
Ramakrishna people.
Okay.
Anyway, at one point I decided I heard about a monastery they had in Laguna Hills and wanted to go join the monastery. Thought I was ready to renounce it all. So I went to them in North Hollywood and I talked to a secretary, and they said, "Oh no, we don't take people like that. We have to know you well. You have to be a member in good standing for a year or more, etc., etc., etc." Things that made perfect sense. I kind of was insulted, a little abusive to that person, and I kind of stormed out of the place. And somebody came running up behind me, a young guy and he said, "Hey, I know where you can join immediately." I said, "Really? Where?" He said, "Well, he had a little motorcycle." So I crawled on the back and he drove me down to La Cienega Boulevard.
Okay. This is what, 1969, 70?
This was 68, I think, as well as I can recall. Anyway, I went in. The first devotee I saw coming out was Bhavananda, and he greeted me with a big hug. I went in, and there wasn't anybody around at that time. This was in the middle of the day on a weekday. Invited me to come back for a Sunday feast. I came back, couple's feast, and then I got invited to move into the temple. That's the way it worked in those days. And
There were maybe approximately 10, 15 devotees. How many were in the congregation?
15, maybe a few more.
Okay.
I mean, there was Bhavananda, Madhuvisa, Tamal Krishna, Jayananda, and a few. I think Shilavati was already there. That's who I can remember.
Right. When during that time in the La Cienega temple, was there, did Prabhupada come to LA when you were
Oh
at that
yeah,
temple?
he came there. In fact, it wasn't too long after I joined. He flew in. We went and met him at the airport. He came and can't recall how long he stayed. I was new and not privy to anything really. I just kind of floated along with the program.
Mhm.
I don't know. I don't think he was there a long time. He came in a couple of times to the temple, I remember. But that's about all I can recall about that.
Okay. So he obviously gave classes then and spoke on the Gita and Bhagavatam perhaps.
I think so. Yeah.
And at that time
No,
in that,
my memory in general is pretty spotty.
that's okay.
I really rely more on inferences and kind of foggy, diaphanous recall. So
Right. What about the deities in that temple? What deities were there?
well, it
Or
was
just a
principally
picture?
Jagannath, Subhadra, and Balaram, which gave me quite a shock the first time I went into the temple. They had installed below Jagannath, etc., were up on the top, and below on the altar was a little tiny set of brass Radha Krishna Murtis. You couldn't even see them unless you got up on the stage where the altar was. The focus was on Jagannath, as I recall. Although I was not tuned in much to what was, I had completely other ideas what yoga was about. And
Sure.
I realized sometime, a few months after I got there, I was sitting in a little room adjacent to the temple where Prabhupada used to sit, like a little space for him, but it was just kind of empty when he wasn't there. I was sitting there reading about Prabhupada's Bhagavad Gita as it is, the old version, and it finally hit me what the philosophy was here. I didn't, up until that time, I was in a fog.
Right.
At least I didn't realize the concept of Vaishnavism, or, I was thinking yoga, Satchidananda, bliss, these other ideas I had accumulated along the way. So
at that time in La Cienega, you were just one of the rank and file, or did they give you a position of temple commander at a certain point, or were you doing Hari Nam?
Yeah, I was there. I guess I was there in La Cienega. I guess it was about a year or more. I even got married there. So yeah, it was a year, maybe even more. I can't remember exactly how long. I remember I was kind of like the Sankirtan organizer. Not exactly. Vishnu Janan was the head of Sankirtan in the sense that he led the kirtans, and he was the inspirational force that dragged everybody out of their nescience every day to go downtown in Los Angeles, smoggy, stinky downtown Broadway in Los Angeles.
Right.
Well, I remember one day one of the girl devotees said, "Vishnu Janan, this is miserable. I'm miserable. I hate this." And Vishnu Janan said, "Yeah, it's true. This is miserable, but at least we're honest about it. We're miserable in public." He said, "All these other people are just trying to pretend they're cool, or everything's okay." And because it was a pretty dicey area and all kinds of characters and
Sure.
Going on right there in the front of the Bullock's department store.
Right. What then in time, I think it was 1970 maybe, that the temple on Watsika was purchased, and he did the move.
Yeah, that was all done by Prabhupada, Jayananda, no, not Jayananda, Dayananda and Gargamuni. I didn't even know, I mean, I guess I heard some vague things, but I didn't know, I wasn't involved with that at all. The next thing I knew, we moved over there, or Gargamuni took me over there and said, okay, you're going to build the temple. You're going to install, you're going to build the, you're going to take this room and we're going to make this the temple, and that's your job.
Had you been
So
into construction before?
Yeah, I wouldn't say I was any kind of a craftsman or journeyman, but, I had done some rudimentary stuff before. I mean, I knew what end of a hammer was what, but that was probably my happiest time, because I went over there before we moved in, and I spent hours and hours and days. And then Prabhupada came, and he was staying upstairs, or maybe he wasn't staying upstairs yet, but he drew a little diagram for me. He called me up to his room and gave me a little diagram. Okay, I want 3 doors, I want this, very simple. And then in the process of building it, he would walk by daily, I guess, and peek his head in and take a look. So he had actual measurements, I think. Well, we knew
2 doors per altar.
We knew the width of the hall, not the sanctuary, not the big room where the temple is in now. He didn't want that to be the temple, at least not then. Quite specific about that. It was that hall in the back that became the fate exhibit. I don't know what it is now.
Yeah, it's still fate.
Anyway, his drawings were very simple, directions very general, just to give me a general idea. And I just measured it off and divided it up, put the main altar in the center, and then tried to do the spacing proportionally, etc.
So that was an altar in anticipation of other deities coming, if you had it divided into 3?
Well, Prabhupada, I think Murlidhar submitted a diagram or a simple drawing of a Nrsingasan. So Prabhupada wanted 3 of those made from metal. So I looked around and found a guy up in Hollywood who had he made custom brass stuff. And we contracted him to build these 3 Sringasans out of brass tubing and then silver plated electronically. And those were what were used to place the deities. And as I recall, the original arrangement was a painting of the Panchatattva in the first altar to the left. The small brass Radha Krishna in the center, because they were dwarfed in the big Nrsingasan, and but Prabhupada obviously had anticipated or was planning to install bigger deities. I didn't know anything about that.
Right.
So. And then Jagannath and Subhadra Balaram were at the right.
Is that the area, the temple room that you first moved into, the temple room in which the installation of Rukmiṇī-Dvārakādhīśa took place?
Yes, yes.
Okay. What were the deities' names before? I mean, I mentioned this before we would discuss the idea of names. New Dwarka, was that a name that was there prior to, or in La Cienega? Or when did that name come about?
I don't think so. As I said, during that time when I was doing the construction and all, I wasn't involved in any of that deliberation, but Now, I think my understanding is that New Dwarka was the name chosen by Prabhupada when, according to Gargamuni, because this was the biggest and nicest temple ISKCON had yet acquired or had,
Mhm.
Prabhupada wanted to make it opulent. And the third period of Krishna's Leela on earth was in Dwarka, where he was a king. And he was accompanied by his queen, Rukmiṇī. And the rasa, the mode of worship, was reverence and opulence. You know, it's in contrast to the cowherd boy days and then the Kurukshetra Pandavas days. So he wanted, I understood New Dwarka, Rukmiṇī-Dvārakādhīśa as being, that was the particular Leela or rasa that Prabhupada wanted this temple to portray or
Okay,
exhibit.
right. What, since you had Rukmiṇī-Dvārakādhīśa, I guess the small deities were named in that way,
I
or
don't
Radha,
remember.
Krishna, and whatever names they had at that time.
I don't remember, yeah.
What was the impetus then, or what brought about the event of obtaining larger deities, Rukmiṇī-Dvārakādhīśa? Was there a letter that was sent, or, you know, what impelled you or the temple there to make inquiries to have deities from India brought over?
Yeah, I wasn't, I don't recall being directly involved in that process. At one point I became cognizant that there were going to be these specially made marble deities bought or ordered and carved in Jaipur and shipped to the States and then installed.
Mm-hmm.
Now, as I recall, and this again is just my recall, I'm not sure if this is accurate.
Sure.
There was a set of murtis carved and sent. I think Shyam Sundar was doing that part of it in India. But that they arrived damaged or broken.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there was some attempt to repair them, but not satisfactorily. And so somewhere in the interim, San Francisco Temple had ordered a set. Now, someone told me that Keshava and Bhutama went to India personally to order that set.
Uh-huh.
I don't remember that. It could be true. Keshava and Bhutama were up in San Francisco by that time. Anyway, Prabhupada told me at one point he wanted to go ahead with the installation. He didn't want to delay, so he said, call Keshava in San Francisco and tell him to send those deities to Los Angeles. So I think it was Keshava himself, maybe Bhutama also, that drove the deities down.
Okay, they in their own van or whatever.
Yeah. Now there are other versions of this story, but this is my recall.
Okay, excellent.
And so they were brought down, uncrated, and again, I mean, this was all being taken care of by Shalavati and Bhavananda and Jayatirtha. I really can't take any credit whatsoever for almost all of the organization and preparation. I was, I wasn't really much of a part of any of that. The whole deity worship program was really Shalavati and Bhavananda, Jayatirtha. Shalavati had a crew, Sachi Devi, my former wife, was one of that crew. But that's between the arrival of the deities and the installation ceremony, I have zero memory.
Okay.
And I only take that as because I wasn't involved. It was somebody else's.
Okay.
Yeah.
How did you then end up being the one that was doing all the offerings and essentially performing the ceremony?
Well, Prabhupada was...
You were president, or you had a temple
Yeah,
position?
yeah, practically. I was GBC. I think by that time, Jayatirtha had become the nominal president. But like he used to say, that being president here is like being the president of Russia. No authority. So yeah, it was liberated. I think I made the arrangement, liberated my time for more other duties. Anyway, Prabhupada was, I think Prabhupada was in India. He wanted to go ahead with the installation, and he didn't want to wait till he got back, as I recall. So previous to all this,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
previous to all this, I was present in Boston when a set of brass murtis were installed by Prabhupada. They were about this big, as I recall. Not big, but much bigger than the brass murtis that we had had. Or it's still there, I think, in Los Angeles. So I was there by circumstance. So I observed the bathing process, etc., etc.
Okay.
So I don't recall the specific instructions from Prabhupada, but I think he just said, okay, I want you to do this. You've seen it. And I think they probably, Shalagati and the others got specific detailed instructions via Prabhupada's secretary, Shamsundar or whoever it was, on, what materials to include, etc., etc. So now also I recall that after the bathing ceremonies, there was a yajna, a fire sacrifice. That's my memory. Somebody disputes that. Somebody disputed that with me. They said they didn't remember that. So I don't know. I did do a couple fire sacrifices in front of Prabhupada for initiation programs.
Prior to that installation?
Prior to that installation. So he knew that I had done that also. So I recall my instruction was, okay, do the bathing ceremony and after do the yajna.
Okay.
Now whether or not that yajna took place, now I'm in doubt because I can't specifically remember the event, but I have always assumed that that was part of it.
Right. So was that like we watched the film and there was some editing, and in those days with the Super 8 film, you don't always continuously run, like you could with a video recorder.
Yeah.
What was the length of, approximately, if you can remember, was it like a half hour, 2-hour length of time of the whole ceremony as far as time frame goes? Or is that a blur?
I don't know.
Okay.
I was, I'm sure my stomach was full of butterflies anticipating doing all this.
Right.
And I probably sat in my office for a couple hours before it started thinking, what am I going to do? I can't do this. But when the hour arrived, I went in, and once we got started, I was in the zone.
Right.
I was totally focused. I wasn't marking time. So I saw that Super 8 film of the bathing ceremony, or part of it. It was like I was watching something new. I don't remember any of it.
Right.
I know I must have been totally focused and not aware
Sure.
of who was around me or what was going on.
Yeah, no, you did a good job. It worked. Was there a time from the time that the deities came down from San Francisco to the actual date of the actual installation ceremony? Was there like
I'm
a
sure-
week prior?
I don't know. I'm sure, I mean, there was preparation. There were clothes to be sewn, designed and sewn. There were, I think Prabhupada's instructions were, do it as soon as you're ready. Do it as soon
Okay.
as you can.
Was there much anticipation from the devotee community of that event? Did they know what was going to go on?
I'm sure there was. I think I was preoccupied not with anticipation, but with anxiety about the whole thing.
Right.
But
Was there much change in the devotee community once the deities were installed? Was there a change in mood or attitude or devotion and spirit of coming together and becoming a large temple as it was?
once again, I'm sure there was. I mean, it's only logical, I think, that there would be. But my memory is again blank. I don't remember.
That's okay.
I don't remember experiencing it. Typical of the way I was involved, I was task oriented.
Right. What about,
And
I'm sorry, go ahead.
well, I think I just stayed absorbed in the task and the related anticipation or joy or all that. I have to say, I wasn't much a part of that. I wasn't much a part of that period.
Okay. What about, were you there when Prabhupada would ask temple presidents from around the country to come and visit LA to give an example of how to do things?
Yeah, he said, this is now the standard. This is the ISKCON standard. I want all temple presidents and all temples to observe what's being done here and emulate the standard as far as possible.
Mm-hmm.
And Prabhupada wanted this to be the next step of evolution for ISKCON temples in the United States.
Right.
Yeah.
So obviously he appreciated your work, he appreciated Shilavati's work, and especially training devotees deity worship. Did she naturally take to that deity worship innately within her own? I mean, she was like the leader of the pack.
Oh yeah, Prabhupada said that Shilavati was the Pujari exemplar. She was.
Right. What about the temple itself, the one on, the Vatsika temple? The temple going from where it initially was built, you built the altars there, and then finally it came out, I guess because of need of more space for the devotees, the community was getting bigger. What was the impetus to change from that area to where it is now? Were you involved with that remodel?
No, that all happened sometime after I had left. When I was there, Prabhupada was adamant. There were a lot of devotees pushing back, not defiantly, but saying, Prabhupada, we've got this big, wonderful building. Why don't we put the temple? And Prabhupada said, no, I want this sanctuary, it was called, to be used for preaching. I want respectable ladies and gentlemen to be invited and to be able to sit here in their standard of comfort and spaciousness.
Mm-hmm.
And I want them to hear kirtan, and I want them to hear Bhagavad Dharma. And as far as I was concerned, that was it. He did not want that to happen. at least then.
He liked the pews, the way they were originally built for the church that was previously.
Well, he wanted, first and foremost, he wanted the LA Temple to be a preaching center.
Okay. As opposed to focusing
worshiping the deities was especially for the devotees, especially for the householders, Prabhupada said. He said this deity worship is, of course, for everyone, but especially for the householders. He said householders, because they're involved in so many material affairs, they have to have deity worship to keep themselves in line, so to speak. So he wanted a high standard of puja and worship of the deities, but that was not, the primary purpose was not display for public, but the locale for householders.
Mm-hmm.
An interesting story that I didn't think about much until years later. Excuse me. Sometime after the deities were installed, I went to Hawaii because Prabhupada was coming there. I traveled to Honolulu. Prabhupada was there. Now in Honolulu at that time, I don't know if he was the head of the temple or I'm not sure, but there was a sannyasi who had a crew of brahmacharis who traveled around and collected money. And they gave a lot of money to Prabhupada for different projects.
Uh-huh.
I think principally for Vrindavan and Mayapur. Anyway, they asked Prabhupada to go to the other island, to the big island, because they had a piece of land there. They wanted to show Prabhupada.
Mm-hmm.
So we flew over to the other island, and they had this piece of land. It was kind of on a hill. Remember, basically almost all the land that was part of what they had or had possession of was kind of a grade. Anyway, while there was nothing really there, not many improvements, just a kind of a little shack on the side, on the side, starting to go down the grade on the side of this little hill. Very simple shack. I don't think there was even electricity or running water.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, they sat Prabhupada down at a table at one point in the shack after a quick tour kind of around wasn't that big. And the sannyasi rolled out these diagrams of these plans he had for this piece of land to build a fabulous temple and install fabulous deities, grandiose and magnificent.
Mm-hmm.
Prabhupada listened and looked, but at one point he stopped the young sannyasi. As I recall, he folded the plans. He said, no, I'll tell you what you do. He said, what grows here very easily? What foodstuffs? And someone said, well, corn grows great, very easy, and guava is native. There are guava bushes everywhere. We got more guava fruit than we could use. I'll say, oh, good. He said, okay, I want you to, no big temple, you can use this very hut. You install Gornatai. You live here in renunciation and austerity. You eat corn and guava. You get a cow or two to get some milk. And your worship will be renunciation and simplicity and austerity. That will be your form of worship.
And how did he accept that? Or did he accept that proposal?
Well, let's just say there was no more talk of building any kind of a temple on that parcel. Even I was, wow, well, that's a tall order. So Prabhupada probably knew also, a little too much to, I mean, these were those spark plug type brahmacharis that they were so active and so, you know, they held their vows by just kinetic activity all the time. I think the idea of sitting there on that hill, worshiping by renunciation, that's my speculation.
Okay.
Anyway, it made me reflect and think, now I understand the whole thing about New Dwarka, opulence, grandiosity. One way to follow the Bhagavad Dharma, but not the only way. There are other ways. And here's the kind of the polar opposite. Brahmacharis, instead of householders, talking about brahmacharis and sannyasis. To come there and spend time living very, very simply and worshiping Gaur Nitai with kirtan. And, you know, a leaf, a flower, a little water. So that, I think that made me realize more about the Leela, the Rasa of New Dwarka. I don't think I had reflected on it as much, and it finally, I understood. Of course, Prabhupada had this in mind from the start, but I was pretty slow.
Anyway, that's a great anecdote and a great understanding of essentially that Prabhupada had a plan for, it was really a preaching mission. And it was interesting how you mentioned that our first temple room was really for the householders. It's a new angle of vision.
Deity worship is for the householders, especially. I didn't prescribe renunciates, etc., from participating, but the special focus were householders.
Right.
He said the householders have to do deity worship or they won't progress. They'll be overcome by, you know, the daily affairs and responsibilities. And it's true. And it largely happened in Los Angeles.
Right. Were you there when Prabhupada did finally get to come to New Dwarka, the temple on Watsika, after the deities were installed, and to hear of his response to their being installed or about the deity worship?
I was there. Yeah, I was there. I remember following him into the temple, the doors opening, Prabhupada doing full dandavats. And then I'm sure he went and sat on the Vyasasan in the back of the area of the temple facing the altars. Now, I'm sure he was quite happy. I think there was probably a kirtan. That's about all I can really recall.
Okay. Well, you've really gave us a lot of information here, and I really appreciate your time. Is there any other concluding thing that you would like to mention? I know before you were going to give a 5-minute little introduction before we started our interview, but
Yeah.
there are some things that you would like to...
Excuse me one moment. I got a
Sure.
puppy here
Sure.
chewing on my cable. Hey, get up. Come on, get out of here. Well, I just wanted to offer my namaskars to all the devotees and the people attending the celebration, and to inform them that I wish I had been able to be there. I was looking forward to coming, Swalas and Jai Gauranga and others did everything they could to facilitate it. But because of those COVID complications in traveling, it just became an undoable task, in my opinion.
Right.
And so I had to cancel. But here we have the wonders of technology coming to the rescue, or at least substituting. And the other thing we've already addressed, I wanted to preface my comments by saying I can't attest to the accuracy, the full accuracy of practically anything I've said here. But this is what I remember. Now I know that in time stories tend to warp and exaggerate and change, and our own preferences and egos do editing, selective editing on what we remember or what we don't, to the point of getting to the level of myth rather than even speaking of reality. But I mean, I have a sense of all that, so I just wanted to tell everybody these are just an old man's recollections.
So we do appreciate that, and I appreciate your taking the time for me and this wonderful occasion, and your service to Prabhupada is genuinely appreciated, and you have been a hero in the past, and you're a hero now, so I want to thank you again, and stay well. Hare Krishna.
Karanda Prabhu ki jai.
Hare Krishna. It's my wonderful
So
pleasure
now we'll
to
continue with His
introduce
Holiness Badinarayan Swami and Rameshwar Prabhu.
I just wanted everyone to see Prabhupada directly teaching Shilavati at La Cienega Temple in preparation for the world headquarters unfolding. That's what she looked like, and that's how Prabhupada was so observant in watching everything she did. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna.
So,
Yes?
so, no, we have it right there.
Give the better mic to Bud.
So, I would just like to say we have Sachi here, the wife of Karanda Prabhu. She's sitting right here. And I've asked her if she could say a few things, and she said she would. So we're going to kind of get her chair there. We'll bring a chair there. And she can sit there, and we'll try to plug her in.
Yeah. She want to go first?
She has some stories and memories.
Let's have her go first.
You want to go first? Yeah, you can go. Come on. Can we bring your chair there? Oh, here, let's bring this chair here. It's better. It's a better chair.
Give her some water, too.
Just to be very clear, this is my first spiritual mother of my lifetime. She adopted me.
give her a big hug.
I remember very distinctly when the temple had been purchased and Prabhupada was viewing it for the very first time. It was in the corner of the lot over there. There was a big kiosk, and we really didn't have that many devotees. There were probably 12 or 13 females, maybe 15 brahmacharis. And that vision, that memory of Srila Prabhupada's pleasure and that oceanic smile when he saw the temple, it was the crowning touch. Of course, pleasing Srila Prabhupada was our goal, our life and soul. And so to see him so pleased, some memories are just etched in my mind, and that's one of them. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta's disappearance day takes place, I believe, in February of each year. A disappearance, thank you. And my memory is that Srila Prabhupada said that this temple was a gift from his Guru Maharaj, and he wanted to celebrate this new temple even prior to restoring it, remodeling it. We hadn't even moved in yet. So we had a major feast and celebration in what is now the Fate Museum, and it was all avocado green. This was 69. Well, actually, it was probably 1970 when we had that celebration, but everything was green. The walls are green, the floors are green. And the exquisite part of this is that this was the first time we saw Srila Prabhupada defer to his spiritual master, because it was his celebration, and Prabhupada just sat on a very small cushion. And then Prabhupada had his Guru Maharaj on the Vyasasana. So that was very new for us. And so Prabhupada really took charge of the festival because it was for his Guru Maharaj. And the feast was spectacular. And Prabhupada even took charge of that. He would watch and see, oh, this one likes gulab jamans, they're all gone. Okay, he would, tell the server, bring more gulab jamans or more samosas or more malpura. In fact, he commented on different preparations, and he loved the malpura. He said, who has made this malpura? It was actually Sahadevi. So he was very, very pleased with that. This was also the first time I had seen the Pushpasheka ceremony, the offering of flowers to his Guru Maharaj. And with Vishnu Jan there leading the kirtans, and Srila Prabhupada, eternally I'll never forget the ecstasy in that room, the dancing, the tears, everyone was just really transported. Just being with Srila Prabhupada was so intimate, and Prabhupada was so pleased, and this was all an offering to his Guru Maharaj. And Prabhupada was just a few feet away from me, so it was, to see him sitting on the floor on a cushion was, what is the word? Stupefying, But the next year, actually, there was a story when we had moved into the temple. It was again a celebration for his Guru Maharaj, and I remember Gopa brought a big, big painting of his Guru Maharaj into the temple, and he was holding it in front of him. And Prabhupada was directing the devotees, what to do with the Vyasasana, because he was going to place his Guru Maharaj's picture on there. And Srila Prabhupada asked a question, and Gopa answered, but you couldn't see Gopa. It was just his Guru Maharaj's picture. And so everybody just laughed. He said, see, my Guru Maharaj is always directing me. I know you've all seen the pictures of Prabhupada going on his walks and coming back, and really taking so much time to exchange flowers with every child, every woman, every devotee there, meticulously. Sometimes Prabhupada stayed here for 6 months, I think. Right? Is that correct? 6 months. Maybe even longer when the Chaitanya Charitamrita was being published, but the fortune that we had is, what can one say? It's just beyond words. Sometimes we would go out and japa walks, and we'd walk past Prabhupada down the alley there, and we would kind of hang out and look up Srila Prabhupada, and sometimes he'd turn around and he'd just say, Hare Krishna, we could see him mouthing it. And when Prabhupada did those things, we just practically lost consciousness. It was just so, we got weak in the knees, and, to have Prabhupada bestow that kind of mercy on us. Well, there's so many memories. I'm just trying to think. One memory, with Srila Prabhupada's garden, which Prabhupada really loved. He really loved his garden. And as I remember, at one point, he said he wanted his samadhi there. That's how much he loved his garden. And so a lot of us would congregate upstairs, where now is the store. And we would peek out the windows and watch Prabhupada. Every chance we got, we would peek in keyholes, or we would peek over windows, or peek through the slats in the, And Gargamuni was in the garden, and he, that evening, or later that day, he just said, I don't want any of you up there. This is Prabhupada's garden. I want him to have privacy, and I want you to leave him, just don't distract him. So the next day, when Prabhupada was in the garden, he noticed that nobody was up there. So he asked Gargamuni, why are they not, up there? And he said, well, Prabhupada, I thought you really deserved your privacy, and that you'd be distracted, maybe upset. He said, no, let them do what they want, let them, congregate. And, so Prabhupada's garden was very, very, very dear to him. There was a couple, I believe I was the first one to start taking care of Tulsi Devi in New Dwarka. And actually, Maharaj was the one that took it over from me when I became a mother. But so there was this couple who was very, very, they were landscapers, landscape artists, and they were helping me with Tulsi Devi because I didn't know how to care for any plants. And they wanted to do an offering to Srila Prabhupada and to Tulsi Devi, and they wanted to build a really nice redwood framed with screens all around for Tulsi Devi. So Grunda thought it was a good idea. So when Prabhupada saw it, he was so pleased to see that Tulsi Devi had such nice accommodations. He said, please invite them into my garden. I want them to come in. I'm so pleased with this. And when we came in, Prabhupada was just kind of leaning back, and he was kind of reminiscing about his mother loved plants. And on top of, oftentimes in India, the roofs are flat, and they do all kinds of things up there. They grow plants or hang clothes to dry or whatever. So he talked about his mother with so much affection that she always grew plants. It was just covered with plants, potted plants. So he was very, very pleased, and he would direct me sometimes. When he was sitting on the Vyasasan, sometimes the Tulsi plants were full of manjaris, and he knew that they were very young because I'd just gotten the seeds from Govindadasi in Hawaii. And Prabhupada would always lean over to Karundar because Karundar was right there, and he knew I was kind of shy. I would always kind of stay to the back, and so Prabhupada said, tell Sachi Devi, that these Tulsi Devis, manjaris, they should not go to seed when they're so young. When they're very, very young, they should not go to seed. It's too hard on her. So, like that, Prabhupada would, give me direction via Karundar, which was what I, that suited me really well. Sometimes I was pregnant with my first son, and I was 22, and dancing in the temple, and Prabhupada leaned over and he said, Karundar, tell your wife she is not to dance, now that she is pregnant. She's 6 months, she is not to dance. So in those days, Prabhupada had to really we didn't have any elders in our temple. I joined when I was 19. Several joined when they were 16, 17, 18. So we didn't have any elders. We were just by the seat of our pants trying to function and survive. And so Prabhupada had to take a very, 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 kind of a hands-on, even with marriage situations, and which he really didn't want to do, being sannyasi. He knew it wasn't really proper, but who did we have? We didn't have, we had estranged ourselves from our parents because their values were not in alignment with Vaishnavism, and we were too fragile to really associate with them, to give them Krishna consciousness. So we pretty much estranged ourselves in the early days from our parents and families. So Prabhupada had to take a very, very active role in guiding us.
I can toss in something quick. Just while you're thinking, you can think about more, but just a quick one. She was saying about the mood. We had an idea, because you were saying how Prabhupada was practically the only adult and we had no seniors, and what it was like. So we had this idea that if you made plans, you were trying to be the controller, and it was false ego, and it was getting in the way of the super soul. So we were, if we went out on, because we would go out sometimes all day Sankirtan, if we went out and we ran out of gas, well, there must be someone here Krishna wants us to preach to. If we forgot the instruments, well, he wants us to distribute books. If we forgot the books, well, he must want us to chant all day. And our Sankirtan leader was a devotee named Vaidjanath. He was a very nice and intelligent person. And it just didn't sit right with him. It was like, devotees don't waste time, and everything's Krishna's energy, and we should use it wisely. So we asked Prabhupada, because the Prabhupada used to give class every day in the old temple room. And he asked Prabhupada questions and answers. He asked Prabhupada, what does it mean to surrender? Now, quite often we wouldn't quite get the question out right, but Prabhupada got an idea of where we were trying to go. So he was with this framework that, if we think, if we make plans, are we trying to get in the way of the super soul? What does it mean to surrender? Prabhupada's answer was, surrender means to use your intelligence. That was his answer. So it was just like you said, it was pretty much, and I was thinking about Karandar, that dog is barking, but Karandar was just unflappable. He was just, and we were kids, we were doing so many stupid things. I mean, one time we used to dry the incense on the roof of the temple, and you could pull up, we would come from Laguna Beach, you could smell, the whole neighborhood smelled like it was they're making rose incense or whatever they were doing. I think they even took us to court for pollution of all things, and they had to move the factory, but I'm not so sure about that. But my point is that one time they were to dry it quickly because there was some Gargamuni needed to deliver the order. Prabhupada called him guard your money. So Gargamuni wanted, and they were drying it in the boiler room. There was the brahmachari ashram, it was upstairs, and they were drying it in the boiler room. And that devotee, what is his name? It'll come to me. Yudhisthira, who was a little eccentric. So he was hiding out in the boiler room when all this incense, and the oil of the alcohol evaporates, and the oil stays in the stick. So they put it in a hot boil, where all the water heaters were, with the idea that it would dry faster. And it was just like the cartoon movies, because the room filled up with the alcohol in the air, and then the flames turned on for the water, the boil. Kaboom! The whole building shook. We ran upstairs. Here comes Yudhisthira. He'd been sleeping in there to dodge. He came out with dust all over him from the dry. And Karandar was, we just would all look to him because he was unflappable. Whatever the thing was, he would just sail on and be steady. He was such a rock of Gibraltar for all of the devotees. So I just wanted to toss that in. Go ahead, Mataji. I wanted to give you a chance to think of some more things.
So that's my.
Prabhupada said, if you want to make a friend, give them a cookie. So every single morning when Prabhupada was present at this temple, and I imagine it went on all over the world, this mercy, big silver plate of cookies would come out every morning, and Prabhupada first it was the kids, first it was the children, and he was so patient and so loving to these children. The mothers would come up with babies in their arms to get cookies, and some of the single women would get babies so they could come up and get cookies. There's a story about my son, Bhakta Rupa, who he wasn't even 2 years old then, and he wanted to play kartals, and this older, younger boy, he was older but younger, he was a young boy, but he was older than Bhakta Rupa, and he wanted his kartals, and of course the boy wasn't going to give them to him, and so Prabhupada leaned over with his kartals to hand them to Bhakta Rupa.
Jeez.
And of course he was stunned, and so Prabhupada said, here, Sachidevi, you give them. So he gave me the kartals, and of course he took the kartals from me. So just an example of Prabhupada's loving exchanges with the kids.
This is from Chicago, but it's in the same Prabhupada's mood. The temple president was Sri Govinda, and this is the old temple that was in Evanston. Interesting. You meet them all here. So just to be quick, there was steps that you came up, big wide steps, and then big doors, and then there was a lobby, and the lobby had like a mezzanine around it. And it was a nice idea. The temple president's idea was that when Prabhupada came in, there was the lobby and then there was the temple room, they had devotees all up in the lobby and they would shower flowers down. And, it'd be a wonderful scene. It was a nice idea. And, but you don't want to do it too soon. Prabhupada comes in, the flowers are already on the ground. You don't want to do it too late. Prabhupada's already walked and missed it. So we had torn up, newspaper, and we were practicing, check. We had a whole system that somebody blew the conch when Prabhupada's car was in, they blew the conch again when he was coming up the steps. And, we timed them, we practiced it 5, 10, 15 times, And it was all down, perfect. So they would just, just as you can imagine what a wonderful scene. So on the appointed day, Prabhupada arrives. He's getting out of his car. The devotee blows the conch. Everyone's queued. Just as Prabhupada's walking up the steps, there was a young lady, a young, Vaishnavi, Mataji, with a baby. And she, Prabhupada's coming, so she came out to greet Prabhupada. But she was a little... What she didn't know, Prabhupada was already coming up the steps, and she came out the door. So she's, there's all this, say, out of the way, Prabhupada's coming, and they're all the big stanyadi. And this lady just froze like a deer in the headlights, She was a gentle lady, she just, can imagine. So she's standing there with this baby frozen. Prabhupada walks at the top of the steps, perfect gentleman. Prabhupada opened the door and gestured. You go first, because she's got a baby in her arms. What's she going to do? Probably just, you go. But the far out thing is, when she walked in, everyone thought it was Prabhupada, and they showered all the flowers on her. And, Prabhupada, sometimes he would just crack up. Prabhupada, it was really a belly laugh, because Prabhupada knew exactly what had happened. And he was just laughing. Temple press smoke's coming out of his ears. Here's $400 worth of flower petals on this Mataji. So. But Prabhupada was a perfect gentleman. I just wanted to toss that in. Give you a little time to think of another method. Or no, I swear.
I'm just so indebted for you telling those stories. My whole relationship with Prabhupada was absolutely awe and reverence. I just saw Prabhupada as a person who had come down from the spiritual world. And hearing... my vision of Prabhupada was the whole weight of the universe was on him, and he was empowered to save every fallen soul. to end the Kali Yuga for 10,000 years. That was all I saw. And when you hear such a personality of such grandeur, of such power, stopping to deal with little babies and mothers and all these, the personal side, just thank you for sharing that, because I so often missed that. Because I was just so locked in the zone of Prabhupada is this personality that came to save the universe. And those touching moments, that this greatest personality, that Tribhuvana, all the devas in all the three worlds are aware of Prabhupada, from Lord Brahma on down. And he's taking the time to give out cookies to his devotees and to father young teenagers in Krishna consciousness. It's just incredible. The dimensions of Prabhupada are beyond anything we could imagine.
You were talking about Prabhupada's garden and hanging out the window, because I remember that. And I remember, Garga Muni saying, hey, you can't do this, you're embarrassing Prabhupada. So, and I remember the exact same thing. We thought, oh, jeez, but and then I remember it was Keshav was the one who told us, you can't, because we used to hang out, you would have one brahmachari would hold the back of your dhoti, and you could lean out and you could hear. And, we would take turns. You get to listen for 5 minutes. So you can imagine the windows. We looked like a barrel of monkeys hanging out.
It was our favorite pastime, even when I came a little later, to lean out those windows.
And you said it just right. Keshav came and told us, hey, you can't do it. I'm sure Garga Muni, maybe he told the women. And then Prabhupada said this. He sat down, he looked up and said, where are the brahmacharis? Where are the devotees? And then he told Keshav, go and get them. Because Prabhupada wanted us to hear. That was the thing. So once the door was open, and I remember one particular time, you were saying how much Prabhupada loved that garden. And he used it for preaching. He would meet in the late afternoon, like about 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock. The sun was, just beautiful. It was just a beautiful transcendental scene. So one particular day, Prabhupada was meeting with, it was a bunch of professors from Pepperdine and USC, UCLA. They were all religious, and who was Stilson Judah was there. So evidently there'd been a conversation on Prabhupada's morning walk on what, and Swarup Damodar was here, later on, Swarup Damodar Maharaj, but at that time he was a brahmachari. And so there'd been a conversation earlier when they talked about professors. And Prabhupada just set it up perfectly. Because you can imagine, these are good schools, Pepperdine, USC, UCLA, they're very proud of their professors, So Prabhupada asked them, they sat down and Prabhupada said, do you know who is God? And they said, we were here, we're leaning out the windows hearing. And they said, oh, we don't know, we've come to hear from you. Prabhupada said, no, I'm asking you, you're teaching, religion, who is God? And, one of the guys pops off, it's not the finding, it's the searching, all that kind of stuff they say, And Prabhupada turned to, at that time it was a young brahmachari, skinny little brahmachari, Swarup Damodar, later on Bhakti Swarup Damodar, and said, he's teaching about religion, about God, but he doesn't know who God is. What do we call that? And right on cue, Swarup Damodar said, oh, it's a cheater, Prabhupada. He's a cheater. You can imagine all these guys, Prabhupada didn't back off. Prabhupada set himself up as the neutral. Prabhupada said that you're teaching, but my student says that you're cheating. And then this way Prabhupada came in as the neutral. It was just so clean. Another time we watched Prabhupada, it was just after the moon shot, Prabhupada opened up someone was saying, oh, they went to the moon and this and that, and they showed Prabhupada the article. So the front page was the moon shot. Prabhupada turned to the second page, and the second page said, taxes rise to pay for NASA. Prabhupada said, this is their real business. Prabhupada immediately saw through the whole thing. So it was just as you were saying, leaning out the window. And Prabhupada's teaching us how to preach.
So I have to break my reverie because this is such nectar. I wanted to, and they're going to go back to the personal sweet stories of Prabhupada. I wanted to share with you tonight how Srila Prabhupada used his world headquarters after the deities were installed. After all those devotees had come in 1970 and been trained in standards, and then Rukmiṇī-Dvārakādhīśa were installed in August of 71. So what happens after that to his world headquarters? But first, I just want to clear up one story. We have heard now twice that Prabhupada had a different vision for the space that we are in right now, where there was a stage and there were pews and so on, rows of seats. It's a fact. He was not initially happy when those were removed. I don't think he forgave Jayatirtha, wherever his soul is at Prabhupada's feet, wherever he may be, until Prabhupada walked into this temple room in 1975 and saw, oh, so this is the renovation that you took this all down for. And we had onyx arches and onyx columns and these amazing paintings on the ceiling. And when Prabhupada saw this temple room, which Tulsi had built with Jayatirtha, Tulsi Das was the president during that time, in 1975, then Prabhupada forgave him. And it never came up again. And Prabhupada accepted the whole concept of the grandeur of New Dwarka. That's what they were trying to achieve. And though it wasn't initially what Prabhupada had wanted for this room, he did love this room when it was presented to him. So I just wanted to clear that up. So, so the deities are installed in 1971, and just so everyone knows, from that date on, Srila Prabhupada's time spent in New Dwarka resulted in more books being spoken and translated and purports dictated than in any other place on the planet Earth. So when we think of New Dwarka as his temple and his world headquarters, that's the first thing he used it for. He used it as a place to write his books. And we should all know, I mean, so many books were written in those rooms upstairs, in his quarters upstairs. It's very important to understand that feature of New Dwarka. And I'm just going to jump ahead to what happened after the 1972 Sankirtan Christmas Marathon that we discussed briefly. 18,000, almost 18,000 literatures in 3 days from one temple. Before that marathon, maybe the world record was 1,000 books in 3 days, maybe books and magazines. It was so extraordinary. So that's Christmas of 72. So all during 1973, and the way we took it was that Prabhupada and Lord Chaitanya were awakening ecstasies way beyond the level of Krishna consciousness that the devotees were at, just to get them to go on book distribution. I mean, the ecstasy of book distribution following that marathon was so intense that it was just totally intoxicating. Every day we were intoxicated. And Prabhupada was writing letters and meeting with us. And so 1973 was the year out of New Dwarka, invented the marathon. New Dwarka invented the most amazing parts of book distribution. We had traveling Sankirtan. We had airport book distribution. We had concert book distribution. All these things were being invented here.
Malls. Camp
Yes.
Pendleton.
And Prabhupada was just telling us this is the purpose of the temples. And I want you to teach this to everyone in the world. And one of the opulences of New Dwarka was to be able to take its best devotees and donate them to the world. I had some hand in sending when Madhavisa requested, I had some hand in arranging for Budi Manta to go to Australia. I had some hand in Triparari, who was our king of book distribution, giving him up, which is a hard thing to do when you're a temple and you want everything for your own temple. But here's the thing about New Dwarka that Prabhupada taught. He taught the leaders of New Dwarka. This is his exact quote. From his world headquarters, he said, "Think globally, not locally." When I heard those words from Prabhupada, and it was time to give up Triparari, it was time to give up our best devotees, to teach others, send them out all over the world. That's how Prabhupada used New Dwarka. And every time we made a donation of an amazing soul, 10 more came to take his or her place. And you know the names of these superstars, you know, Leela Shakti, Vrindavan, all this, Mula Pakri, all of these Atma Shakti. So many amazing devotees. Gopa Vrindavan, I mean, they're just amazing souls that came and flourished here in New Dwarka in book distribution and taught the world how to do book distribution. The whole world learned from what was pioneered here. And that's a fact. What else happened in New Dwarka? The BBT Library Party was conceived and born from New Dwarka. We all know how much pleasure that gave Prabhupada. 1972, the deities are installed in August 71. 1972, Prabhupada creates the BBT. Around April or May of 72, he creates the BBT. Now the press is in Brooklyn, but the BBT publishing and warehousing and marketing, that's all here in New Dwarka. And from New Dwarka, and from the BBT that he created here, he built this movement. I don't think we have the time, but if I read to you the loans that devotees from around the world were asking Prabhupada for, and he was considering how he wanted this movement to go, and he would tell first Karunda and then me, take the money from BBT, here, give 130,000 to Madhavisa to buy Melbourne Temple. Here, give 120,000 to Bhagavan to buy the chateau in France. Here, give 25,000 to Hansaduta to print the Bhagavad Gita in Germany. On and on.
San Diego, San Diego, Laguna Beach, Denver. I mean, we can just go down the list. These were all BBT loans. Sankirtan vans, all BBT loans.
You know, maybe one day before this 4-day festival is over, I'll read this list. I read it once before. It's this amazing, I have a list of every loan that Prabhupada gave. Mm-hmm. And if you hear the amounts and the cities and the continents that he was dispersing his BBT money from New Dwarka to, you see why I say he built this movement through the BBT out of his world headquarters. It's a fact. So, obviously we all know the story of the 17-book marathon in 1975. But what you may, if you weren't here, may not know is that that was not just a marathon of the BBT devotees, the press devotees. Tulsi was still the temple president, and what he did with the temple devotees during those months, he had this entire temple focused on the marathon the way the devotees at the press were focused on it. He had this temple doing devotees' laundry, shopping for their toiletries, feeding them, whatever necessities of life had to be taken care of. The new Dwarka temple provided and supported, and that's how those 17 books were produced in 2 months. We could not have done it without the entire New Dwarka community making it possible. We had no time to even look for prasadam or toiletries or laundry or any of those necessities of life, shopping for those things. Tulsi did the whole thing in the background of the marathon. So what did New Dwarka teach the world from that marathon, the world of our movement? That nothing is impossible. That was the realization that everyone in our whole movement got from that marathon. From that New Dwarka marathon, nothing, and spreading Krishna consciousness, nothing is impossible. So that was one of the, this is how Prabhupada used his world headquarters to teach book distribution, to teach library book distribution, to publish books, sell them by the millions, and finance everything in ISKCON. I remember at the end of 1975, Prabhupada had decided to sign a contract to build our Bombay Juhu Beach temple. But what I, of course, could never have known until Surabhi came here just before his disappearance. When Surabhi, who was the architect, devotee architect, when he came here, he told us what Prabhupada had told him, that sitting on his Vyasasan, looking at Rukmiṇī and Dvārakādhīśa, Prabhupada was on a transcendental plane beyond anyone, talking to Krishna, Radha Krishna, Rukmiṇī and Dvārakādhīśa, about this gorgeous, amazing, grandiose temple that he was going to build in where this temple was. He was going to build this phenomenal, and Rukmiṇī and Dvārakādhīśa were telling Prabhupada. And you can't imagine this conversation going on. None of us were aware of this. The deities are telling Prabhupada, no, I want that built in Bombay. And Prabhupada said, no, I want to build it here. This is the world headquarters. And Rukmiṇī and Dvārakādhīśa told Prabhupada, no, I want it in Bombay and Juhu. You can't make, I mean, so Prabhupada shared that story of him talking to Krishna in the deity form with Surabhi, and Surabhi shared that with all of us. How amazing that from his world headquarters and from these deities, the most amazing temple of our movement in India at the time was built.
They were also thinking globally.
Oh, yes. Rukmiṇī. Oh.
Whatever service was going on for Rukmiṇī-Dvārakādhīśa is what we should do for Radha Govinda. And I recall that when we were installing Radha Govinda, that was our whole meditation. For weeks upon weeks, we were waiting and waiting for the deities to come. And as soon as they came, immediately we wanted, Srila was the temple president, and he wanted to install the deities immediately. And we were just thinking how lucky we were that we had Jai Tirtha come from Los Angeles, who was, the caretaker of Rukmiṇī-Dvārakādhīśa. So for other temples outside of Dwarka, that standard was extremely important, and it was something that all of us strived for. And that was the continuation of going through all different temples in America. we all look forward to Rukmiṇī-Dvārakādhīśa. I would come to LA, I'd go into Pujari room, and I'd see all the things that were going on in there, and it was mind-boggling how beautiful everything was. It was so arranged so perfectly, and the deities were so gorgeous. So for a lot of us in other temples, this standard was incredible.
And it's not past history. Shivaram Maharaj, who's famous in Hungary, the GBC there, and he's famous for his dedication to deity worship, an extremely high standard. So I would visit there sometimes, and he's my sannyas guru, so I would visit sometimes. And he was, transcendently proud, not arrogant, but that proud, let me do something nice for Krishna. So he was showing me that the Pujari room, and it was just unbelievable Pujari, and it was just like no other Pujari room I'd ever seen. And he was showing me all the different features and the heating and the floor and all this different stuff. It's beautiful, beautiful, all handcrafted wood, and so I'm very impressed. Then a couple years later, after you redid this, the Pujari room here, which is just inconceivable, he wrote me a short note and said, "We have been defeated." And what he really loved was, he said, because he'd never thought of it, that you've got all the deity outfits, but if you've got a wood door, you can't see. But these are all glass, and everything's so the sequins don't he's into everything. And he just said, "Send me the plans, send me the designs." They're already redesigning to come up to the new Dwarka standard. So it's going on.
I want to read to you two sections from two letters that Srila Prabhupada wrote. One right after the marathon in 1973, and one right after the marathon in 1975 to New Dwarka. In both of these letters, he promised that because of this endeavor of the devotees here, well, let Prabhupada say it. So first, right after the marathon, Prabhupada wrote, "I beg to acknowledge the receipt of the letter dated December 27th, 1972, and with great happiness. I have read your figures of the amounts of books sold in 3-day period, December 22 to 24, 1972. It is scarcely believable that more than 17,100 books could have been sold by one temple in 3 days' time. That indicates to me that people are at last becoming serious." And then he goes on to describe how unique his books are. Then he praises devotees, quote, "The boys and girls in Los Angeles and all over the world who are understanding and appreciating this unique quality of our transcendental literature, and voluntarily they are going out to distribute despite all circumstances of difficulty. By this effort alone, they are assured to go back to home, back to Godhead." So that
Sounds
was
good to me.
So that was Prabhupada's letter to New Dwarka, to the boys and girls of New Dwarka. I just want to read one more letter that he wrote right after the book distribution marathon. And again, it's not just to the BBT press devotees. The entire New Dwarka world headquarters made that marathon possible. So Prabhupada wrote, "I am in due receipt of your letter dated August 31 and the 6 new volumes of Chaitanya Charitamrita. So the books have increased, and they are all very nicely done. I think I may stop all touring and just sit down here for translating. You have taken seriously the publishing and also the distribution of these books." This is a letter to New Dwarka. "And I know that my Guru Maharaj is pleased with you because he wanted this. So by this, your endeavor, you will all go back home, back to Godhead. So 2 different times Prabhupada wrote to New Dwarka that because of the endeavors that are going on in his world headquarters, you are all gonna go back home, back to Godhead. And all we have to do is continue with his purpose and these endeavors, and these words will be the result. Hare Krishna.
Right.
Mataji?
The old adage, that's a hard act to follow.
I'll toss in something simple. We've been looking at the big scope. Now just to go to a little focus to an incident. The Krishna book arrived, and I remember we were painting here in the sanctuary, and the truck pulled up. And I remember, because we used to get Back to Godhead magazines, and we'd all usually arrive just before breakfast, and Karundar would say, hey, you got to unload the truck before you had breakfast. And we would form a line. We just form a line and pass the books from the truck all the way. The warehouse is back here, where the Pujari room is now. So so we expected it to be the latest BTG, which was great. You know, we could read that. But then I forget who it was, maybe Karundar, but they, standing on the truck, crowbarred one of the wood cases up and held up the Krishna book. And we were just in ecstasy. And Prabhupada, we went around the side with the kirtan, and Karundar held up the Krishna book. Prabhupada came to that, it was a side window, I think it's still that overlooks the alley. And Prabhupada was getting his massage, I think, but he was just in his gamsha, so you could see, and he began playing Madanga on his stomach. He was so happy, you know, literally he was playing like, you know, along with the kirtan on his stomach. So it was and then he would read in the evenings, he would read, I think instead of Gita class, but it was in the evening, I think it was in the evenings, he would read Krishna book, and he would add purports. So he was describing that when Narada Muni appears before Kamsa and says, you know, the 8th son of, you know, Vasudeva is gonna kill you. And so, of course, you know, there's the agreement that, okay, well, I'll let all the other children live and I'll just wait for the 8th child. But Narada Muni, Prabhupada said, wanted to accelerate the appearance of the Lord. So Narada Muni, if you count, Prabhupada went like this with his hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay. But what if you count this way? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Well, then the 8th becomes the first. And what if you start in the middle? And he reminded him, he said, this Krishna is very tricky. Look at what he did to Ravana. Look what he did to Hiranyakasipu. You know, look at Vamanadev. You know, you can't trust Vishnu. So, you know, and so Prabhupada was showing, in this way, Prabhupada said Narada Muni completely bewildered Kamsa, and he thought any one of the children could kill him. So Prabhupada, so he would add these little purports, and it's described that when Krishna is performing the Rasa Leela, not to go esoteric on you, but when Krishna is performing the Rasa Leela, Radharani was not feeling special. And so Krishna separated from the other gopis and went with Radharani. And it's described there in Krishna book. And it's described that she said, you know, I'm tired and there's thorns, you know, can you carry me on your back? So Radharani is being carried on Krishna's back. Prabhupada told this story. I heard it personally. And then you hear that later on the gopis, Krishna had abandoned her and Radharani was alone and the gopis found her. But Prabhupada described what happened because that when Radharani's on Krishna's shoulders and they're going through the forest of Vrindavan, there was a vine hanging low. Prabhupada told it. And so Krishna said, why don't you swing from that vine? It'll be very nice. So Radharani's completely surrendered. She's holding onto the branch and Krishna took off. And so the gopis found Radharani hanging from the branch and they had to help her down. So Prabhupada would read Krishna book and add these just, after he told us that story, then, you know, it's in this temple room, and then Prabhupada got up, the Vyasa-san was in the back, and there was a side door, and Prabhupada was going out the side door, and, you know, someone was slipping on his slippers, and we were just frozen, stunned. And that's when Prabhupada said, yes, if I told you everything, you would faint. And then off he went. So there's a little personal detail.
I have 3 more amazing glories of New Dwarka to just report to you about.
Please.
Prabhupada had told us that the way Krishna consciousness is going to be spread is through cultural conquest. Those words came from his lotus lips into our ears. And so, born from that, all these artists became so empowered. And the first transcendental exhibition of dioramas in the Western world was created. This Fate Museum was so ahead of its time. It's so incredible because it opened in 76, 77? I mean, it is so incredible as part of Prabhupada's vision of cultural conquest. And from this, dioramas of, if not at this moment in our movement, eventually there'll be museums like this everywhere. There'll be museums for the art, which is priceless, and there'll be museums for these diorama exhibitions, which is priceless. Cultural conquest. And the second part of that is Rath Yatra. Up until the LA Rath Yatra, every temple that did a Rath Yatra, apart from the amazing carts and the parade and the kirtans, when they finally arrived at the park, there were the deities on the Rath carts, there were prasadam distribution tables, and there were book tables. Every Rath Yatra festival, that's what it was. Until LA took to heart this message of, New Dwarka took to heart this message of cultural conquest. We designed a Rath Yatra festival in 1977 that was so unique to the movement, filled with pandals and exhibits, stages at different ends, creating an environment so once people by the thousands came in, they wouldn't even be able to see out to the Karmi world. It would just be totally saturation and immersion of their senses and mind and intelligence in Krishna. And born out of that, LA Rath Yatra became the festival of India that travels around the whole North America. That came out of this world headquarters, cultural conquest.
It's like churning the ocean of milk and all the wonderful things that come out of it.
And the final thing I wanted to mention that came out of New Dwarka, Prabhupada's world headquarters, was in the Western world. Srila Damodar Maharaj was preaching, doing science symposiums all over India and in some other places. But somehow or other, Krishna sent Sariputta to New Dwarka. Somehow or other. And he came to the BBT and said, I want you to publish my publications. And we said to him, well, we'll fund you if you provide us with the tools for scientific preaching to defeat the mechanistic, godless science. And born out of that came Origins magazine, which to this day stands the test of time. And born out of that, Sariputta and Dhruta Karmaprabhu teamed up to start their research on this incredible forbidden archaeology, which, even though they were based in San Diego, but New Dwarka funded it.
Okay. You beat me to it.
Prabhupada told us there were 2 great demons of this Kali Yuga, that this Hare Krishna movement appeared to annihilate. The first was godless government in all its forms, but especially godless communism. for those who know history, just to digress, the Vatican in the mid 1930s had to choose, in order to survive, between Hitler and Stalin. And after deep reflection, they chose Hitler. You can't even imagine such a choice. The two greatest evils on the planet. But Stalin and communism was lining up all the priests and murdering them as part of their ideology that there should be no religion. It's the opiate of the people. Prabhupada hated godless communism. And he said that by our mass Sankirtan book distribution, the atmosphere of the planet Earth is being spiritualized. And the result of this massive book distribution and yajna is that people in the Soviet Union, their religious sentiments are awakening. And he predicted in 1977 that just continue this mass Sankirtan yajna, and from within, the people will bring down their communist government. And in the future, Prabhupada said, historians will note this period and how by your Sankirtan yajna, the world changed. And it came to pass in the 1990s when they tore down that Berlin Wall and the whole Soviet Union empire crumbled. And the other great demon, which we have not defeated yet, and anyone who heard the morning class this morning knows how important this is. Prabhupada's explaining that the entire world is being taught to be from schools, which the whole world attends, how to be absorbed in the bodily concept of life, how to turn humans into animals. That was Prabhupada's whole class this morning. And Prabhupada said the second great demon of the age of Kali is godless science. And it is the mission of the Hare Krishna movement to defeat this godless science. We have to preach in the schools, we have to distribute books massively, we have to build our TOVP museum, and we have to do everything possible to present Krishna consciousness as a science, not just a sect or a religion or a branch of Indian religion. Prabhupada introduced Krishna consciousness as a science to annihilate the demon of the so-called science. And that remains the task that has been left to all of us.
Sariputta gave an example that Prabhupada gave to him. Prabhupada said that, I'll be quick.
No.
You ready to go?
No.
I'll be quick. Prabhupada said, you've ever seen, we've all, unless you're culturally deprived, you've got three buildings lined up, and the middle building, sometimes they want to demolish it, and it just, when the thing just collapses on itself, the other two buildings are fine, and the one in the middle collapses. So with that picture in your mind, how do they do that? Well, what they do is they get the structural engineering plans, and they figure out what are the linchpins, where is the weight load held, and you blow out those linchpins, and the building just implodes on itself. So Prabhupada told Sariputta that the worldview, just like you were saying, it was based on science, it was based on Freud, there's different conceptions that our current worldview rests on. I meant science, of course that includes Darwin, Prabhupada said the missing link is my foot in his face. So that's another one, And I was in Prabhupada's room, we're a little off the track, but they said to Prabhupada, that the guy was saying that we've evolved from monkeys. Prabhupada said, what evolution? You're still monkeys, And then Prabhupada said, maybe your lineage is from monkeys. He said, but my lineage is the great Vedic sages of India. And it was just a golden moment. But the point I wanted to make is that Prabhupada said worldviews change. It was the age of faith. It was the age of enlightenment. It was the age of reason. So, there's industrial ages. So world views change. It's not that they don't change. They change all the time. There's no reason, if we blow out those linchpins that are now this mechanistic, materialistic worldview, you blow out those linchpins and the worldview will change. And that is our mission by book distribution, to educate. The greatest enemy of tyranny is the educated public, Thomas Jefferson. So if we educate people, they'll be broken, freed from this tyranny. That was Prabhupada's intent. And Sadaputra told me that he heard that from Prabhupada here.
Needless to say, I'm very humbled by my God brother's vast knowledge and awareness of Prabhupada's worldview for the Sankirtan movement. So I'll just tell you some simple little stories. That was kind of my mentality. I was a simple young girl.
What is a meal without a gulab?
Well, I had the privilege of cleaning Prabhupada's quarters while he went out for his walk, generally down to either Cheviot Hills or Venice Beach, I believe. And so we heard Prabhupada was back, and so we just, began rushing, and I was cleaning the floor, and Prabhupada opened the door, and he said, "Hare Krishna," and he threw a gardenia at me, and hit me in the head. Just, Prabhupada was so sweet, a very mystical thing would happen when Prabhupada was in the room and giving Srimad Bhagavatam class. And afterwards, we would share what our realizations were, or how Prabhupada answered our questions, or how he soothed our heart. And everybody in the room that I spoke to had the same feeling, that Srila Prabhupada related to each individual in the room in a very transcendental, fulfilling way. And that would happen over and over again. So it's a phenomenon that's just, Prabhupada is just...
You were saying about gardenias?
Pardon?
You were saying about gardenias? So I got two Karandar stories. That, I was just a bhakta trying to keep my dhoti on, and where was the prasadam, and So we were a couple of other brahmacharis. We were going to paint some trim in Prabhupada's room. So we all had, work clothes on, and Karandar was going to show us what to do and supervise us. So we all, you're just brahmacharis, and we're chit-chatting and this and that, and we burst into Prabhupada's room. Prabhupada wasn't supposed to be there. I don't know where he was, but all of a sudden we see Prabhupada there. He was Prabhupada was sitting behind his desk. His desk there. And he had a big gardenia garland wrapped all the way around his head. And Karandar said, Prabhupada, we didn't know, we all just hit the floor and that was it. But Karandar said, Prabhupada, why do you have the gardenia garland wrapped around your head? Prabhupada said, very good for headaches. So Prabhupada was like aromatherapy before it was cool, And another Karandar, when the temple room was over here, there was an Indian gentleman, and he used to come with his assistant. And the man used to come and fall down on the floor and roll in ecstasy. And, we didn't know what to do. We thought, maybe it's real. Who do you know? And he would roll and wail. It was a whole circus, right? So one time, he was coming in a series of days. He was rolling around, and the Charnamrita was on this side of it. And he was, in his course of greeting the deities and rolling in ecstasy and crying, he was rolling around and knocked the Charnamrita stand, and all the Charnamrita all over the place, and So Karandar said, well, something's not right here. So Karandar asked Prabhupada, what do we do? And he explained, this man is coming, rolling on the floor in we don't know, faux ecstasy, real ecstasy. What do we do? Prabhupada said, beat him with a stick. If he's in ecstasy, he won't notice. I mean, it wasn't that we were supposed to beat him with a stick, but it was that, what happened, obviously we didn't beat him with a stick, but the next time he went in and did this circus, so-called in ecstasy, oblivious to all things, Karandra gave him a little shake, said, hey, come on. The guy immediately got up. He was indignant that we didn't recognize his ecstasies, stormed off, and we never saw him again. So Karandra, knew how to deal with things.
I want to share one very brief mystical Prabhupada story, which almost every devotee has a similar experience. Whenever you're in a crowded temple room and there's hundreds of devotees and Prabhupada is sitting on his Vyasasana, there's always that moment when, as Prabhupada's looking around, you feel, and maybe everyone at the same moment is feeling it, that Prabhupada is just looking at you. And there's an exchange, and you begin to disintegrate into tears and all kinds of emotions. And almost every devotee I've ever talked to has had this experience of Prabhupada looking at them and knowing their heart, and it was so personal. Incredible how one person could affect the heart of thousands simultaneously. And the first time I ever saw Prabhupada, physically saw Prabhupada, when I had joined in September in Portland, but they had the Rath Yatra Festival in San Francisco in June of '71, just before I came to New Dwarka. And I was in a crowd in Golden Gate Park of between 10 and 20,000 people. And Prabhupada is speaking, giving his class. And there was this moment where I just felt him looking right at me. And me seeing him for the first time. And it was the most mystical experience. I just fell apart, crying like a baby. So many devotees have had that experience, that very intense personal interaction with Prabhupada. He had that ability. Krishna's in our hearts. Well, Prabhupada is his representative and acts like that. Very mystical. Hare Krishna.
Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Sisi Rukmiṇī-Dvārakādhīśa ki jai. So we'd like to thank His Holiness Bhadri Narayan Maharaj and Rameshwar Prabhu and Sachi Devi for a really wonderful presentation. So we have a little bit of prasadam for those of you that wish. We'll have some prasadam outside. And tomorrow, of course, is Holy Janmashtami Day. So we're fasting all day. So a little sabji and little something. Yeah. So thank you very much for coming. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Jai Prabhupada. A personality like Prabhupada walking the earth.
Thank you, Mataji.